present sharing evaluations and experiences with annuals, perennials, grasses, and shrubs with a fall twist is Nancy Chennault.
Hi, thanks for having me. And I am going to share screen so that I can get rid of me. You don't need to look at me. We want to look at flowers. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Nancy.
Right. That's right. You're all muted, so somebody's going to have to keep track of being able to hear when I'm speaking. And I'm going to get rid of my video because you really don't need to look at me. Okay, so that was a interesting, since I talked to Jim way back in the spring. I think it was even late winter when we talked about doing this program, and of course it was going to be in person. Those of you that know me, I usually come with a carload of plants, and I am able to share visually a lot of the things that you're only going to be able to see pictures of tonight. But hopefully we can do it justice as we take another look at annuals, perennials, and grasses with kind of that fall twist. It's October 6th today. And it was a beautiful, beautiful day. Soon we forget that it's fall, but it's going to be coming around the corner really soon. So this program today was basically to give you an idea of, as you're moving from the summer season into fall, some of the expectations and maybe even a little bit of planning for next year. Okay, there you go. Annuals are the summertime powerhouse. We know that. Everybody loves that color that goes from April until October. It's an industry that has fast-paced development of new colors, growth habit. The evaluation process was mentioned in my introduction. I really do try new things. There's always something new and improved, and of course, very competitive market. We're talking about annuals. Market quickly, and they disappear just as not able to perform. Some exciting discoveries, those discoveries together to have people that to plant them every year. But when you think of all of the that will give you that from April to October, you've always want to include annuals. Of course, that April includes the standby, the petunias, dahlias, the selection goes on and on. Beautiful containers can be created that are a mixture of both seed and vegetative annuals, and they just go on for months and months, just getting better and better and better. There's always new colors, styles, sizes, how big, are the flowers, how big does the plant get, and the growth habit. These colors are often melded and blended and brought in from other varieties that you may see on the market. But sometimes they'll surprise you with a new size, such as this one singular blossom from a fibrous begonia that is called Big. And it's big because the actual individual blossom is about 2 inches across. That came onto the market about 6-7 years ago. And the plant itself is big, but the flower is what sells it. There's also a new New Guinea impatient that's called Magnum. And I had the fortune to give those evaluation about probably 12 years ago now. But you can see the standard size of the blossoms on a New Guinea impatient, and these were the Magnums. And this photo was taken in middle of October. And so it shows that it was able to hold up to those early fall rains as well. Always something new and or improved. And so as an industry, we try to bring folks into a situation where they're able to see the new plants. I love being able to visit trial gardens, trial plants where they're evaluating. With the COVID, those were really limited this year. So it was really hard to find a venue, but fortunately down at Woodburn Fessler Nursery had a very restrictive a one-day event where we were able to go in a few at a time in a certain time slot and actually view the new annuals, and those for 2021. So it was just a really good way to get back into the market, if you will, and find out what's all new out there, because it's pretty exciting because there's always something new and improved. This year we're trialing new 2021 plants in Castle Rock. And if you're familiar with Castle Rock, we're also a proven winner city. We were selected as a proven winner signature city in 2018. We have a commitment that we made to the Proven Winners brand and that plant material, because as a salesperson I worked for a company that sold baby plants to greenhouse growers for 10 years. And so I had the opportunities since 2001 of trialing from a lot of different vendors, a lot of different breeders, a lot of different growers. And so when it came time to choose a brand, a type of plant that would perform well and be consistently exciting for people, we decided to go with the Proven Winners plants. And in 2017, Proven Winners saw that and they said, oh, we're going to make you our first Proven Winners signature city. So Castle Rock has a distinction, and every year we are able to trial and evaluate the new plant material. So we do this in big, huge planters. We also brought in some of their new color choice shrubs to kind of be the highlight in the planters. And so we have those planted in big tubs right down by City Hall. So people can look at them. We as a bloom team look at them, we evaluate, we try to choose something new every year for the following year. So with something from these containers that are for 2021, we will choose to be in our containers or our baskets for 2021. So that's one of the exciting things that we get to do as part of the Castle Rock Blooms. We have this new Medusa potato vine, Ipomea, that has fingers. It's quite intriguing. We're always looking for a potato vine that when it's planted in combination with our other plants doesn't totally take over the show. And even when they tell us that there's a compact one and it's not going to trail all over the place, it's really hard to have it fit with the other annuals because it seems to want to dominate. So maybe Medusa is it. We don't know. But I think that's one plant we'll probably try a little bit of with it next year. And then, of course, there's the trailing potato vine. And so we're quite selective where we use that. And of course, it's usually in a basket because, as you can see in this case, the basket is hung at 15 feet and it's already touching the sidewalk. One of the new plants that they had introduced this year, it's not really a new one to the market, but it's new to the Proven Winners, and that's Ruellia. Ruellia is a interesting plant, and it is the dominant foliage in this container, and it has a beautiful lavender bloom. But in our climate, even with the heat we had this summer, we saw maybe 1-2 blooms all season long. Well, obviously, it's not a plant that's going to do well in the Pacific Northwest. It has dramatic foliage. That might be something that we can use, but it won't be a plant that we select for 2021 for Castle Rock. The other thing we look to when we're looking for annuals and doing the evaluations is how easy are they to take care of? How do they grow together? And in this case, we have a new Scaevola, which generally you'll see Scaevola either in white or you'll see it in a lavender blue. And in this case, it is a multicolored, it's a striped lavender and white. So it's really floriferous. I was really impressed with the amount of blossoms on it. And so this may be one that we try next year in some of our containers. The other thing we look for when we're choosing plants for containers, and this is a consideration for a homeowner as well, is that how much time do you want to spend grooming it? And we have 178, close to 200 planters in downtown Castle Rock that we help the businesses maintain. We're kind of their go-to. We try to keep all those containers looking really good. So we don't want to have a plant that we have to continually go in and deadhead to groom it. And you can see where there's plenty of deadhead on this Euryopsis, which is also not a new plant, but it has been a selection that has been selected for a proven winner for 2021. But it has grown over itself, so you still have plenty of bloom, but you also have some deadheading that probably is not going to sit well when it's in an up-close personal look on a downtown street. The same with the osteospermum. This new bright deep red is a gorgeous color, but the osteos are always one that frustrate you because when the blossoms fade, the first thing you want to do is pick them off. and get them off of there. So these planters were not deadheaded all season long, so we could see that and we could see how they performed. Once again, it blooms over itself and does a really good job, but at the same time, if you were looking at it at a close proximity, you would not want to have those right there on a planter on a downtown street. I mentioned the fact it's a competitive market. They are always to develop new varieties. This happens to be a marketing strategy put together for the big begonia, and part of a plant introduction. They call it CAST, or California Spring Trials. It did not happen this year. I really missed it. I've been going to those since 2001. So to miss one where you didn't get a chance to meet and greet, talk to people in the industry, look at all of the new plants, it was really a hard thing to not participate in this year. But they're going to bring it back in June. It's usually in March or April, but they're going to bring it back in June 2021 for the new 2022 product. So hopefully they'll be able to do it. Being able to look at all of the new petunias, for instance, side by each, find out if they've had growth regulators, what their nutritional plan is, being able to find out what they've done to introduce something new to the market. So this just happened to be a welcome to CAST at Danziger at Head Start. And this little petunia down here in the bottom is one of my favorites. It's a Mari Queen of Hearts. And if you look really, really closely, you can see that each red on the petal, or excuse me, on the blossom is the shape of a heart. So it's just one of the really nice ones that come out of Danziger. And then of course we always visit Proven Winners too and see what they've got coming in for the next year. So these pictures were taken in 2019. There's exciting discoveries that you may make in your own garden. So always be on the lookout, especially this time of year as you begin to see if plants are performing as you expect them to be. This exotic geranium Persian shield was a discovery for me. And it is actually a sport or a mutation, if you will, of a cold shield, which is an exotic geranium, which has a really heavy zoning in the leaf, almost a bronzy look to it, and this bright orange flower. And a couple of years ago, I had one of those that reverted back, if you will, or sported out, and it was a bright limey green leaf with that orange flower. Now there's also an exotic geranium called Persian Queen that is exactly that same chartreusey leaf, but the flower is pink. And so I just kind of made it a combination of the two, and I call it Persian Shield. One thing, when you do have a discovery, and sometimes they'll revert back and disappointed because you've lost it. And so you always want to put out, and I've taken cuttings of this for 3 years and they always come true. So I'm pretty excited about Persian Shield, but I haven't been able to introduce or to interest any in it. One of the things exotic geraniums, they do have the incredible markings that makes them exotic, really strange looking leaves a lot of times. And the reason they have that is because it is not stable. So that's the thing that, excuse me, it is, it has virus that makes it not stable. So you never know. And it might be next year these leaves all change again, I don't know. But for 3 years, that's usually a good indication. One of my nice discoveries this year was Tibucina, the princess flower, which has an incredible purpley blue blossom. And I'm familiar with one that the blossoms are about 3 inches across, and they're singular, and the foliage is wonderful, and one of the reasons I grow it. But this year I found the one that comes in a panicle, and it's that same color, but it's smaller, but there's lots of them. Another thing you may end up with is what's called a chance seedling. These are Boliviensis begonias, and I'm kind of, if you haven't discovered yet by what's around my cedar tree in the backyard, I have this thing for begonias, and I absolutely love them. And we'll talk later about how to save them over and grow them on from year to year. But the chance seedling that I was able to find growing in the gravel on the floor of my greenhouse was a dark chocolate leaf with a beautiful orange flower. And most of them are green leaves. But one of the things about the Boliviensis begonias is that they really bloom best when they get plenty of sun. So it's a nice introduction to the trade. And the original was the bonfire, boliviensis. I still have my original bonfire from trialing that I did since 2008. So in fact, it's right up there at the bottom of that picture. But the chance seedling you find, cultivate it, bring it on, and see what you can think. My mother's fuchsia, Sporty Rose, was a fuchsia sport from Hidcote Beauty, which is the sepals are that creamy white, but the corolla is a coral color on Hidcote Beauty. And she ended up with one branch of her Hidcote Beauty one year that had these beautiful corally pink blossoms. And so she did as you need to, and she took cuttings from it and she cultivated it. She made sure that it was stable for 3 years. And then she actually went through the registration process. So you'll find Sporty Rose, Beverly Gage as the person that has registered it for the American Fuchsia Society. So we all make sure, all my siblings, my sisters, my sister-in-law, make sure that we have these Sporty Rose so that it keeps going on and on and on. Zera Shades Geranium is another, it's not new, it's nothing other than the fact that I discovered it at Zera Plants many, many years ago, and I absolutely love it. It's pretty scraggly looking until you really look at it close. And I think that's one of the things that as you enjoy your gardens throughout the summer and you get into fall and the sun starts to go down at a little bit different angle, you begin to pick up a lot of different hues and a lot of different things that make a plant extra special. And Zera Shades, it always looks awful in the spring and I wonder if I'm going to lose it, and then it comes right back like gangbusters. And one of its attractions are these beautiful little tiny geranium leaves that have, they always look like they're frosted. And then this most incredible single geranium blossom of this amazing maroon color. And you saw on the previous slide just how many of them there are. So it's one of those up close and personal plants. It's always surprising me. So always keep your eyes open for the possibilities. You never know what you may discover right around the corner. Another thing that is happening now that we're experiencing some climate change are the surprising hardiness of plants that may not have been as hardy as they were meant to be. And one of them is the calla lilies. And this calla has come back multiplied in this container for 3 years. Generally, calla that's basically bought as a plant just die and back, but it's come back every year and blooms its head off. The thing that is also happening is with the Gerbera daisy. They're a lot hardier than people think, and now they've become a perennial in containers in my garden because they just keep coming back year after year. One of the things that I get busy and I don't have time to rogue out plants, clean up planters, do anything except just kind of look at them and pull off dead leaves. And if I had the time early in April and May, I probably would lose plants that when I finally get to them in June, by golly, they're coming right out of that pot and here we go again. So I guess it's an indication that you don't give up on things too soon. One of those is the Brugmansia, and I always buy new ones because they usually freeze. And this last winter, because it was really the winter of no winter, it was so mild, and the plant actually died all the way down to the pot. But by golly, in the spring, here came some sprouts, and this is what it recovered to do. It's in its 3rd cycle of bloom right now. And if you're familiar with Angel's Trumpet, in the evenings, it smells absolutely incredible. Very, very fragrant. The Gara Stratosphere White from Proven Winners is actually Castle Rock's official city flower. And Gara is an annual half-hardy perennial. But we found that it absolutely loves drought. It doesn't want to be too wet. And so in our dredge spoil type landscapes where it's almost like planting in a sand dune, the Gara has performed very, very well. And so it is a perennial for us. And sometimes we lose 1 or 2, but we always end up with some seedlings too. The other plant that is hardy now that hasn't been are the cordylines that have the very distinctive colors. We're familiar with the Dracaena spikes. The formation of those leaves makes it different than the phormiums or the New Zealand flax. Both of the plants, the cordylines with the very colorful leaves and also the phormiums, were not considered to be hardy at all. And now plants are thriving in landscapes, in gardens, coming back year after year. This one was planted about 6 or 8 years ago, and I covered it for the first couple of winters so I wouldn't lose it. But now I don't even worry about it anymore. Our winters are so mild that it's a perennial for us. One of the things we found in Castle Rock was that the verbenas, this is Superbena dark blue, and it never died, and it just came back. And so it was worked into the colorful bed at one of our parks to be part of that again, instead of taking it all the way out. Another plant that has been hardy for us is the blue. Up at the top, you can see the blue salvia has come back, as well as the cannas. So there again, we worked it into the color display of this entrance bed. But the one we're trying this year, and we will see, is the eucalyptus, which is hardy to 30. So we'll see. And my hope is that we can cut it back and it'll come back nice and bushy next year. The annual grasses are something that sometimes are overlooked when we're talking about annuals, but the cypress, the papyrus are true annuals, and they are some of the nicest accent plants that you can use into containers. This is Fireworks, one of the pennisetums, and the other one that I always like to show is the Prince Tut. This King Tut is the one at the back that'll get 6 to 8 feet tall. Prince Tut is a little bit more refined with the same umbels at the top. And I love the way it accents a container. And of course, the one annual grass that people are most familiar with is the purple fountain grass, which is another pennisetum. All of these annual grasses, I've tried to save them over, mild winter or not. They are an annual, and their job is to go to seed and die, and they're done. But this little red bunny tails in the background is a perennial and comes back every year. But the main point with the annual grasses was the purple fountain, which doesn't start blooming until July, but boy, is it worth it. So I think we'll pause right here. It's kind of about halfway through for a few questions, if anybody has any questions.
There are none so far, Nancy.
Okay. All right, I'll keep going, and if I get going too long, cut me off. Okay. I told you I would mention as we look to fall exactly how you can make some of your plants live over. It's good to hold on to a annual type of plant. And generally the tuberous begonias, most of these are from seed, actually. The Boliviensis type, a lot of those are from cuttings, but this is that big bonfire again, my original from 2008. But the nonstop type begonias, the illumination hanging basket type begonias, as well as the Boliviensis can all be wintered over if you take a few precautions, and their main enemy is being too wet. They can handle cold amazingly well. I have nonstop begonias that come up underneath the trees in my garden every year. It takes them a long time to bloom. In fact, they've just started blooming probably in the last 3 weeks to a month. But they don't freeze, they will rot. But by being underneath trees, of course, they stay dry and they don't get pounded by all the wintertime rains. So the first thing I'll do, and I've stopped watering this display underneath the cedar tree. I've stopped watering it for about the last 3 weeks. It's looking a little sad right now, but that's okay. We're going to be getting some really heavy rains coming up in a few days. So my goal now is to bring them into the greenhouse, not heated. It's cold. It's more of a cold frame than a greenhouse, but bring them in so that soil does not become saturated and let them get totally dry. You can do this with your baskets. You can do this with ones that you have in the ground if you want to pull them and just leave the foliage attached. But these pots will be allowed to just totally dry out. And as you can imagine, the foliage wilts down and just kind of lays there on top of the pot. And then I just go in and I brush it off down to soil level. So all I have going through the winter are bare pots with the big tubers in them. The big bonfire is one of 3 from a basket that I was given to trial in 2008 in a 12-inch basket. And the tuber on that one right now is as big as a salad plate. And it just comes back like gangbusters every year. And I absolutely love it. They're just my pets. I don't know what to say other than the fact that I get a lot of pleasure in having them come back bigger and bigger every year. But there's a lot of different Boliviensis in here. You'll find a lot of different genetics with them. A lot of different breeders have played around with them for a long time. But this is my coral with the dark foliage. That was also a chance seedling, and then the orange with the dark foliage. So somebody might have some questions on wintering over the begonias, but they really are quite easy as long as you don't ever water them until you begin to see the little nubbins come up in the spring on top of those tubers. So some red flags. What are we going to watch for this fall, and what do you want to pay attention to? Well, slugs were a problem all year. I don't know what it was like in Clark County, but it seemed like every time I turned around, even in this really hottest, driest times, you'd see the slugs going across the sidewalk early in the morning. So slugs are always a problem, especially in the spring as you're beginning to generate new growth. And so you're going to want to watch on your annuals pots. Slugs will put eggs down inside the pot, just hiding all the time. So I guess the main thing is to get rid of them. So the best way, of course, is the old mechanical control, as well as some of the baits and the chemical controls. As always, being master gardeners, and to follow the label instructions, because the label is a law. So I hesitate doing much as the way of telling people what to use for what, but I just be sure that, as always, doing the research when you're answering people's questions. There's many pests moving up from California because of our series of warmer winters. Some of the insects that would maybe be a problem and then they would freeze, then they would not survive a winter, and so they'd have to be transported back up from some of the warmer areas. Now those warmer winters are causing things like Petunia budworm to actually be a pest. And I've watched it over the last 25 years come all the way up into, I had my customers were in Southern Oregon and Ashland and in Medford, and they began having trouble with Petunia budworm, and then I saw it in Eugene, and then it came up into the Salem area, and then it was in Vancouver, and now we have it in Castle Rock as well. This is the, and it's also geranium budworm is basically the same thing. So this is my deck with the planters along the edge of the deck, with a lot of super cows, which is a Petunia relative. It's a cross between a Petunia and a Calibrachoa, and a lot of petunias. And this is what it looked like in the middle of the summer. And this is what it looked like a week ago. And it takes it that little bit of time. And you can see it was after the rain, and people tend to think, oh, it rained. By golly, it took all of the blossoms off and they'll rebloom again. But generally when blossoms are not there, they're gone. And you'll see that in a hanging basket where it'll be beautiful and blooming, and then all of a sudden it's green. It's because the budworm is doing its job. And what it is doing is it is going in there and it's eating the bud. Now what you see here is budworm poop. That's frass. And that's usually one of the indications that you're going to be able to see that they've done some, they've done some damage, because the whole inside of this Petunia bud is gone. But they also will go right down in, and there's the budworm right there, right down into that bud and just eat it out before it ever has a chance to bloom. They'll do some damage on the leaves, they'll do some damage on the petals, but they'll also just basically go in and make sure your Petunia or your geranium never opens, never has a chance to bloom. And you can see the frass down here at the bottom. So when it comes to budworm, the best advice I can give you is to follow the frass. Follow the frass and pick them off of there and squish them. There are some of the they're non-chemical, they're biological, the bacteria that basically eat caterpillars from the inside out. But your best control is mechanical, because then you got them. This day I went out and I started collecting. I ended up with about a dozen, maybe 18 of them, and beginning to see bloom again tonight. They are really, really hard to spot, because generally when they're eating green leaves, they're going to be green. The petunias, the calibrachoa that were in there were oranges, and so I did have some dark ones that were easier to spot. And there was a dark one that had obviously been eating. And then here's big piles of frass again. So you're always going to see the frass, and then if you look really close, pretty soon you'll see them, and they will they squish quite nicely. They lay right in along the stems. They're pretty good at hiding, and they also, and you see this one just kind of laying in there, looks like part of the leaf. So one of the more satisfying ways of destroying something that's destroying your beautiful annual color. So if you remember, that's what it looked like before. And after the budworm got it, then it looked like this. A problem that really shouldn't be in Washington State. It should stay in Northern California. So on to perennials, and some of the things that will help you get into the fall with some perennial maintenance, some perennial ideas. There's both the deciduous perennials. Deciduous perennials will basically die to the ground. We've got the crocosmia here on the right. This one happens to be Ember Glow. And then the white upright phlox that smells so good. This one's David. But they die to the ground, but it's a good idea when you're cutting them back to leave about 4 inches of stem. By doing that, you're able to leave a little deflector for the fall rains, so that if we get pounded on by a lot of winter rains, you don't end up rotting the crown. So it's a good idea to leave some with your deciduous perennials, just a few of the stems. And then it's also a good way to identify where they are and where they're going to be coming back next spring. On the evergreen perennials, here we have a ballerina primrose, the valentine, and then of course the ever growing in popularity hellebores. And basically it's just a matter of cleaning up dead leaves and just letting them kind of do their thing for the fall. And on to the grasses. And I kind of wanted to do a little bit more on grasses, especially the perennial grasses tonight, because this is the time of year that they really shine. The grasses are beginning to blossom and give you those blooms that catch the wind, that catch the light. They really have a way of adding a show to the garden this time of year. So the perennial grasses are something you don't want to overlook when it comes time to planting a landscape. This happens to be a stipa. It's pheasant's tail, and it has, interesting, it's beginning to pick up some coloration in the leaves themselves, but it will reseed, and it's reseeded itself into this pot that had a fuchsia in it. But the fuchsia didn't die because it was so mild in the wintertime, and now the grass and the fuchsia coexist, and the blossoms on it are incredible and give a really nice display. And of course the ponytail grass, or the Mexican feather grass, is another one, and just to have the sunshine through it, it's quite lovely. And this plant was deemed a pest in the Northern California area because it will reseed, but it never really reseeded for us, but now it is. I just collect the plants and put them in a pot and have a place to put them somewhere else, but they can become somewhat of a pest because they will reseed quite vigorously now that we really don't have any winters. One thing they don't like is constant rain, because then the seed rots. So that helps too, that we get plenty of wintertime rains. Another one that is a favorite is the miscanthus, the maiden grass. Lots and lots of different varieties of the maiden grass, and it's starting to bloom now. And especially if you have a backdrop where you can see it silhouetted against a fence, it gives you a long, long period of blossom. And some of them get really big, such as the porcupine grass, and it'll stand 6, 8, 10 feet tall. And the blooms have a pink to them. Heavy rains, these get knocked down, and generally a good fall cleanup on those to kind of cut them off. One thing with the perennial grasses is that the longer you can leave them, the better, because they really do a nice job of giving you some interest in the wintertime. One like this porcupine grass, if it's laying on the ground, obviously isn't doing you any favors. But that miscanthus, the maiden grass we looked at before, with snow against that same fence, it just adds a very distinctive architectural feature to your landscape. And so I try to encourage people not to cut the grasses down too early, but then look for that new growth in the spring. And as you begin to see it, then by all means, get all of that off of there, all the way down to about 4 to 6 inches. Another one of my favorites, and I love it because I love to say it, is the Hakanakloa macra. This is Aureola, which is the one that has the golden foliage. And this is right along, the one on the left is right along our sidewalk, and you can barely get through there now, but I don't have the heart to cut it back. But it has blossoms on it now, beautiful, beautiful little tiny blossoms. And it just really adds a nice highlight to any part of the garden. And I love saying Hakanakloa. So I'll always have Japanese forest grass. There's a lot of different, there's a green one, but there's the totally all gold that are, the blades are all gold. And then these are, of course, are the striped gold and green. The blossoms themselves are kind of a purpley color. I didn't pick up too much of that, but it looks like just like little purple spritzes coming out of the plant this time of year. So they have interest that way too. What the Japanese forest grass does when it freezes, basically it turns purple and then it just lays flat. And so generally what I'll do is I'll just go in and you just take your hand and you just kind of run it across it and it pulls right off. If you want it a little bit shorter, then you will need to use some shears to cut it down closer to the ground. But it's easy to clean up, and then in the spring it just begins to come back like gangbusters and you have it again. Another grass that is a lot of fun to use are the Carex. This is orange sedge. There's the Carex or sedges. And they have a way of reseeding, which again, when they do, just pull them up and put them somewhere you want them. But they also tend to have really long blades that come in. They actually, planted alongside of a sidewalk, will tangle you up. I've been tangled up in Carex tendrils, if you will, more times than not. So it never hurts to give them a haircut, and you just pull them up like a ponytail, and you give them a shearing and give them a nice haircut. One of our volunteers that takes care of City Hall, she said that her next life was going to be as a hairdresser because she was learning how to trim the Carex and to keep them nice and neat. And they look a little bit butch cut for a while, but pretty soon the new growth comes out of the middle and it covers it up, and they're just a nice mound. I know when we, at the nursery, we first started selling these Carex back in the early 90s, and people thought they'd come in, they liked it. It has really orange highlights. It's really bronzy. It's really quite shiny and pretty. But they wanted to know where our dead grass was. Do you have any of that dead grass? Because it does tend to look kind of like a dead grass. Another Carex is ice dance. Ice dance doesn't grow quite as crazy and doesn't need to be pruned as much as the orange sedge does. And then one that's kind of unruly, but I still like it and it's soft, is frosted curls. And it's another Carex that sends out the tendrils. And then you can see the seeds down on this one. It doesn't reseed as readily as the orange sedge, but it will reseed some. The Mondos, I do enjoy the Mondo grass. These beside the sidewalk are going to need to be dug and divided one of these days. And this is the regular green Mondo, and on the right is dwarf Mondo. And so it's a very, very slow growing plant. These were both planted at exactly the same time from gallons. And you can see this is the dwarf Mondo and this is the regular Mondo. So in fact, I think I took a Mondo out of here and put it at City Hall in Castle Rock. That's why this is bare to use in the landscape down there. So these three may be divided and taken somewhere shortly, but that's the regular green Mondo, and it's a really carefree, easy plant. Evergreen, doesn't need much of anything. I don't think I've ever pruned it. I've never done anything except dig it up and divide it, which that one needs. And the black Mondo, and black Mondo is wonderful to use in with other evergreens. It spreads by underground roots very, very slowly and makes a big big mat and coexists with perennials, and as you can see, shrubs really well. But the black is really nice, especially if you have an area that you've not used a bark mulch, because it tends to get lost in bark mulch. But it's a nice color accent for a garden. Another one that is kind of like the sedges color-wise, but it's a little bit different growth habit, are the Acorus. And the Acorus love water. They're also tolerant of drought. So it's kind of a universal, use it where you need a spot of color. And anytime that you can bring gold into the garden, it really helps to add that highlight that kind of shines. So the Acorus is good for along the edge of creek beds, on the ponds. It can even exist down in some water a little bit if you want it to be. This was a surprise for me. This was a Dianella that I trialed, that I was sent some sample plants in probably 2009, 8 or 9. And it came to me as a grass, and it did survive. It wasn't supposed to, but it was not hardy for our area. It was another Northern California. I think it actually came out of San Diego County, but they sent it as part of a trial packet, and I planted it, and it didn't die. And so it just got better and better with these blue stems, blue blades that were really quite pretty. And lo and behold, this year it bloomed, and I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. So then I had to look it up and see. And sure enough, this particular variety of Dianella, it's called Sweet Flag, I think, but it's supposed to bloom. But each individual bloom is just amazing. And I just absolutely love it. And I was so excited. And I'm so glad that I left it, even though it didn't seem to be a very impressive grass. And in all these years, this first year it's bloomed. So I had a surprise this year too. I really liked it. So autumn, here we are. It is fall. Things are starting to change, and it looks like by the weather forecast, by the end of the week, we'll really know we're in the middle of it. We're not going to have thunderstorms and 65 degrees. We're going to have thunderstorms and some lightning and lots of rain and showers, and it's going to be 56. So here we go. We're looking at what's going to be really some pretty changing colors. We're going to have some maples changing rapidly. They're starting to, the sweet gums, the vine maple. We're going to have a lot of things changing, including our rhododendrons. You know, I don't think sometimes, but this is PJM, and it picks up wonderful autumn color at all. Also, so if there's ever a time of year that you want to select some fall color for your garden, this is the time to do it, because you're going to get an idea of what their true colors are. The timing might be a little bit off because it's always a little bit different depending on what stresses of the summertime, and also what our night temperature drops and when it happens in the September, October range. So it's just a matter of being able to see something and you like it and bring it into your landscape to add those accents of fall color, because whether we like it or not, you're going to enjoy your fall into autumn, because that's what we're doing right now, is we're falling into autumn. But as you can see, and this was my garden in the, I showed you the phormium, but now you've got the autumn joys type sedums that are blooming. They're beginning to go to seed. The bees just absolutely love those. And then you've got the annual still display as well. So it's the best time of year, I think, because you can enjoy a lot of different color and a lot of different flowers. And after our stresses of the heats of summer, the smoke where plants just basically quit blooming for a while, because why should they? It was so dark and cloudy. And now that it's been freshened and the sun is shining, I think it looks as good as it's looked all summer, and the flowers are happy and everything is looking really, really quite nice. But we've got winter wonderlands are next, so it won't be long. It's right around the corner, whether we like it or not. So thank you. I appreciate it very much. Hopefully I didn't take over your entire meeting. And so we'll answer any questions that you may have. I'd be happy to. So I'm going to bring up my video again if I can, and then at least I'll be talking directly to you and not just to the picture. Where are you? I just saw it. Video, come back. There you are. Okay.
Nancy, there is a question. Is the exotic geranium Persian shield scented?
No, it is not. No, sorry.
And then there's
Most of the exotics aren't. There's, you know, two categories of the specialty geraniums, if you will. The exotics, which are all those incredible leaf colors. Some of them even bloom minimally, like Vancouver Centennial and some of those. But a lot of them do have very striking blossoms to go along with the foliage. And then the scented geraniums are more of the herbal type geraniums, somewhat similar in leaf habit, but they say that if you smell very carefully that they all have different fragrances, like so different.
there's a question asking, how do you become a trialer?
Well, this came to me as a representative for the company that was selling young plants to greenhouse growers. And so the breeders, the suppliers, the propagators, their goal was to get material into the hands of the people who were going to be selling them to those that were going to be growing them for the consumer market. And so it was in their best interest to make sure that those sales people had those plants so that they could speak to them like they knew what they were doing instead of just looking at a picture in a catalog. So the company I worked for happened to be a proponent of really digging deep into trialing. And because we had a nursery, we had a venue that we were able to do that. So we would have these plants would come to us for evaluation. When I retired from that company in 2010, I asked them if they'd still send me plants, and they said, sure, be happy to. So a number of them still do, because you know they want to know what we think about them in the Pacific Northwest. And then, as I mentioned, Proven Winners always sends a Castle Rock a good sampling of the new plants for 2021, in this case for next year, so that we can take a look at it, so that we can make our selections of what we want to grow. As a Proven Winners signature city, we are in a position to be their showplace, to showcase their plants. And so they want to make sure that they get the best plants into our hands so that we can actually trial them. So I guess a long answer to your question was there would be an opportunity if you reached out to, you know, to a company and said, gee, I would really like to, you know, try 6 different kinds of daisies and, you know, see how they grow and compare. And then perhaps, especially with a Master Gardener program and your trial gardens and things like that, you should be able to get something. Begin to talk to some of the sales representatives from the companies. I don't know if you've had, well, I know our connection was Carrie Meyer from Proven Winners, correct? Because somebody had reached out to her about making a presentation, and then she reached out to me to see if it was something I would want to do. So I guess that's the best way to start, is to actually get to the supplier and see if there's anything that they could put together a package for you or something like that. There's a Garden Riders package. I also belong to Garden Riders, so the Garden Riders always get sample plants every year. And so you don't have to be associated with a nursery or a trial garden to do that. So that might be an opportunity for some of you.
Thank you. There's a question about the grasses. One, are there some that are deer resistant and some that also do well in shade?
I haven't had any issues with deer really munching. Rabbits sometimes, especially the low ones like the little dwarf Mondos and things like that. But the deer pretty well leave them alone. I haven't really had, and I do have deer. They love my upright fuchsias, my hardy fuchsias, and my heucheras, but they haven't really done any damage to the grasses. Probably the black Mondo is one for shade. The Hakonocloas, the Japanese forest grass, grows in deep shade. The gold is not as gold, but it still is a nice grass for shade if you have a shaded area. And the Acorus will take anything. It'll grow anywhere.
So there's a comment that says, I loved your presentation. Do you have any tricks with Lenten rose? I'm having such a hard time establishing them and they are so beautiful.
The hellebores. Wow. They are one that will probably thrive better without hot afternoon sun. They do like a forested, rich soil with organic matter. I haven't had, if you have heavy clay, you're going to really need to amend it because they don't seem to be happy with a heavier soil. I think more, I see them as like on the forest floor with a lot of leaf duff and a lot of organic matter. They like that protection of their roots. They'll actually grow in a container if you can kind of duplicate those. But there's so many new varieties out here that are on the market that were developed in Germany, and they were propagated from tissue culture. So they are juvenile stage, so they bloom really early. And so I think to get those stronger varieties, I'm not quite sure if this person had hellebores that were from seed or collected, but I would definitely look to some of the newer varieties with the strong upright stems and kind of giving them that good organic matter.
And there's two questions about overwintering. One is, can you overwinter a dahlia? And the other is overwintering pots of begonia. Should they be in dark or light, near window, etc.?
Okay, so the first being the dahlia, basically for overwinter, the idea is you want to bring it in and have it as a pot plant to be a dahlia, or you're just trying to save the tuber? Because most of these plants that are cultivated for outside are very unhappy inside. They don't make the transition very well to keep looking like they did outside. The light levels are lower, the humidity is different, temperatures are not outside temperatures, cooler nights, et cetera, et cetera. So the dahlia tubers, kind of the same as with the begonia tuber, is to let it get really dry and get the wet soil away from it, store it in a bag, and then watch for it, little eyes to come out in the spring, and then plant it and away you go. The begonias, they need that dormant period, they need to rest. And so if we're talking about the tuberous begonias, the best thing to wait to have a pot tuberous begonia is just to let it get totally dry. If it's something that you want to bring onto your porch and enjoy for a while, just don't water it, because it will not be using up a lot of water this time of year because the temperature is getting cooler and your chances of rotting it off get better, or that's not a very good idea, that you rot it off more consistently if you water it like you did during the summer. So the main thing is letting them dry totally is the best way to winter them over. I hope that answers the question.
So there's a question about the Proven Winners testing plants. Are they on display throughout the city or in testing areas? I'm guessing this is someone who would like to go and see them. Is that possible to do?
Yeah, the Royal Velvet has a budworm, so there aren't any blossoms on it right now. I noticed that the other day. But they are at the 5 big planters across the parking lot at City Hall in Castle Rock, which is on A Street. So drove by them today. They're looking really good. The gal that has adopted the City Hall and is maintaining them is doing a really nice job. And so other than the fact that the Royal Velvet has Petunia budworm and stopped blooming, the rest of them look great.
Well, it looks like that's the end of the questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity of being able to speak in a totally different venue, but hopefully it worked.
Great, and I think John wants to come up and say something, so we'll give him a second.
Okay. One real quick thing, my email is on that slide, and I think, I know Erica has it, but if somebody has a question or something and wants to email me, they're more than welcome to. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy, this is John. I really
John.
do appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
We've got a lot of good ideas there. I can't wait to try them all out.
Well, good.
I was the one who asked the question about how do you become a trialer, because you've really piqued my interest. So.
And I think probably the best thing would be a garden writer, because